I wanted to talk a little bit about Teresa Blanding and John Martin's work on tonal cognition and just some of my preliminary thoughts about what the design tone is all about and just some kind of considerations of the design tone. The design sun-earth tone, which is really the tone of the design crystal in some sense. I mean, there's an interesting coincidence in human design between this deep mystical connection between divisions of time and orientations or faces of a dark matter crystal, basically, what could be described that way anyway. And even some impossible ones, right? Like a 5-sided crystal with 5 equal sides, I think is impossible, right? But anyway, it's impossible in our atomic world, but maybe it wouldn't be impossible in some sort of dark matter, dark energy, what we consider, what looks like dark matter or dark energy to us. Okay, so, here we go. Let's get Gate 46 in action. Gate 46, let's get comfortable. I just had to show the pond is doing really well. I have little fish in here, the tiger lilies, it's really doing well. Okay, so, gates are these. So first of all, let's just understand how the gates have to work. Right? So first of all, at any given point in time, anywhere on the planet, we're all getting the same neutrino field. Same conditioning field, everywhere on the planet at the same time. People get this wrong, and they think that the rotation of the Earth, which is a day, people get it mixed up, right? They think that the rotation of the Earth is what changes where the planets are. It doesn't. It doesn't matter how the Earth is rotated. It matters what point in time it is. At that point in time, whether you're in Antarctica or whether you're in, Timbuktu, you're fine. You're in the same field, which means that the gates, as a crystal sheath in space, must be as big as Earth, right? And so think about it. You have Earth here. Here's Earth, right? And then you have to have a gate, say Mars is in Gate 3. Gate 3 has to be like the amount of neutrinos going through the Earth have to penetrate the entire Earth. So it does not matter what point of the Earth you're on. Mars is always in that exact same gate, line, tone, line, color, tone, base. That which is a positional system, which also correlates to an orientational system in the non-atomic reality, which is interacted with by neutrinos, which also interact atomically. Although, as far as science knows now, you're lucky if maybe one neutrino interacts atomically with one atom in your body in your entire lifetime. So they don't really interact effectively in our current models of understanding. And even my understanding and calling it dark matter and so on, I don't know if Ra really said this, it's been years since I dug into the cosmological side of it, but at that time, along with all of my studies, which included studies into things like dark matter and dark energy, and of course there are a great many models that do not include dark matter or dark energy, right? So there are alternative explanations and models. What I'm saying though is that just to think about how the neutrino works, right? How the neutrino works. Okay. So, everyone on Earth is getting the exact same neutrino field. Now, they're not just getting Gate 3. So let's say Gate 3 is over here, and Gate 3 is doing all this stuff. Okay, now we take another gate. Let's take, I was talking about Gate 46, because I was lounging, and I was saying, Gate 46 loves to kind of be in its lounge gear and spa and all that stuff. So you have Gate 46. So Gate 3 is here, all the neutrinos. Then Gate 46 is over here, totally different side, right? In fact, okay, how about this? Take let's make a very simple example. This is perfect. Take the equinox and the solstices, which happen in the second lines of gates 10, 15, 46, and 25, right? So you take those 4 G-center gates, but it doesn't, I guess it doesn't really go in that order. It's not like it goes spring to, but 46 is what I'm born into. It's not really called the fall equinox even. It's not called the fall equinox because fall occurs the other 6 months offset in the southern hemisphere. So it's actually called the September equinox, right? September equinox is gate 46. The March equinox, it's not called the spring equinox, it's called the March equinox, is gate 25, right? So you see these, so here's the Earth, again, here's the Earth, here's the size of it, and we have these gates, which are personality crystal bundles. They're parts of prime personality crystal bundles, which comprise 4 gates, right? So gate 46, right on the edge. Let's imagine what's happening. So let's actually use Mercury as an example. This is even more interesting. Let's say Mercury, neutrinos are passing through Mercury, right? Now, I actually think that Ra in his Rave Cosmology materials goes deeper and has an alternative explanation. So if you are really interested in this topic, you know, and I probably will be revisiting that, because it has been years since I've gone deep into that Rave Cosmology material, because I just haven't really, you know, I mean, I haven't necessarily found a lot of practicality to it. But, and even in this case, I don't think it necessarily makes a difference, but it's nice to have some conceptual mental model for what we're actually talking about, how it actually works, right? So here's one model. And I don't think this is exactly how it works, but let's just say the example. So we take Mercury. So here's, okay, here, we gotta find a smaller rock. Or even the moon. I mean, the moon would be an even better example. But yeah, Mercury or the moon or anything smaller than the Earth. Okay, so this is Mercury. This is the Earth. So neutrinos passing through Mercury, they go through Mercury first. Then they hit the gate, right? What we're calling the gate, which is actually a personality crystal lattice or sheath that the neutrinos pass through in space. It's right, the personality crystals, the program is the personality crystal bundles, the 16 prime personality crystal bundles that each comprise 4 gates, and they take a very extremely precisely delineated grid of space. Now that can be a 3-dimensional space, but it's still, it doesn't really matter if it's 3-dimensional, because we got to stop thinking 3-dimensionally in some sense. I mean, when you realize that the rotation of the Earth doesn't make a difference, right? The rotation of the Earth's rotating, but it doesn't matter because gate. I'm going to use the G center. The G center. I'll use 4 of the 8 G center gates now. The 4 equinox and solstice ones. The gates of the vessel of love. 10 and 15. So 10 is here and 15 is here, and then you have 25 and 46. You have this whole cross, bloop 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 bloop, and you have basically, in each case, the gate has to be as big as Earth, as a lattice or a curved, kind of, right? It has to be as big as Earth, because, so it can't really be very close, because it has to be far enough away that you can actually fit 64 of these things, each one being the full size of Earth. Why? Because again, Mercury is smaller than Earth, so if a neutrino passes through Mercury and then passes through Earth, that neutrino that has passed through Mercury and then Earth is not guaranteed. The ones that touch Mercury are a subset of the ones passing through Earth. So if that happened, then your Mercury activation would not be correct. But we know it's correct. We know it's correct through our experimentation. It does work. So then imagine this model. And I'm not saying this is how it works, because again, I believe Ra does actually go into detail and nuance with some of this. And I'm not familiar with all of his gray materials and so on. But what happens is the neutrino passes through Mercury. So the neutrino is going, and it passes through Mercury. And what it actually probably passes through is Mercury's design crystal, say, because Mercury probably has a prime crystal. And then the neutrino keeps going, and then it hits the design crystal. Then it passes through the gate. So say Mercury's in 15, right? It hits gate 15 and it goes, so to speak, and so that it can bathe all of Earth in those neutrinos, so that all of Earth's neutrinos get bathed in Mercury's in gate 15, right? Because the gate would have to be almost like this massive crystal lattice where the neutrino hits it and then it crystallizes and propagates across the whole lattice, so that all the neutrinos passing from ambient stars or whatever the hell are all filtered through gate 3, so that every single point on Earth, neutrinos that have passed through gate 3 carrying the information of Mercury, because that neutrino passed through Mercury first, we're saying Mercury is in gate 3. See what I'm saying? So the actual physical size of the gate must be the size of Earth in this model. At least, because at least the size of a face of Earth, I guess you could say. Well, sorry, there's only one face, but the size of a divided face of Earth. Okay. Divided in half, because you only need it to come from one side, obviously. You don't need it to be from both sides. Okay. The other way it could work is that if it just passes through the prime crystal, the prime design crystal, I guess, of Mercury, and then it passes through the prime personality crystal of gate 3, if each gate has its own prime crystal, right? I'm not really sure. I'm just kind of spitballing here. Then it could pass through that, and at that point it would. But see, my main point is, when you really think about it, in order for people on the entire planet to have neutrinos passing through their body that have gone from a planet to a gate, it's not possible with planets that are smaller than Earth unless the gate itself broadcasts, or as a sheath, basically is always programmed a certain way. And Mercury comes along and enters into gate 15, and the second it goes into gate 15, it crystallizes that Mercury in gate 15 activation. Suddenly, everyone on the entire planet, everyone on Earth, doesn't matter if you're here or here or here, or if it's day or night, or where it's been spinning or whatever, because Mercury's in gate 15, right, it's going, and it's like bathing the entire planet in neutrinos with the information of Mercury in gate 15. That way, everyone who's born at that moment, as long as that Mercury's in gate 15, has Mercury activating their gate 15. It doesn't make sense if it's only neutrinos that have passed through Mercury. Because again, Mercury is much smaller than the Earth. So those neutrinos that have passed through Mercury then pass through the Earth, which is a subset of the ones I'm talking about here, right? That are in gate 3. What I'm saying is gate 3 is bigger than Mercury, quote unquote. Right? So it's kind of a funny thought experiment to realize, the neutrinos passing through Mercury don't all pass through the Earth. But they do all pass through a gate. And they do, right? And that's depending on where the Earth is in its annual cycle, and where Mercury is in Mercury's annual cycle, if we can call it that. Its own synodic cycle, or the synodic cycle between Earth and Mercury. And when you see how, what we're really looking at when we're saying something has activated is, we're looking at a 64th section of the ecliptic, but it even goes deeper. If you go to base theory, it's 60,000 however many. I haven't done the math in a while, but it's a lot. It's a lot. 10,000 tones? Is that how many there are? There's 10,000 tones. So in any case, there's 10,000 tones, right? 10,000 unique tones. There's 6 tones that repeat, but each one is uniquely a variant of a particular color, okay? And each of those colors is itself a particular subdivision or variant of a line, which itself is a subdivision or a variant of the gate. So depending on how you look at it, you really are seeing, and so to say that Mercury is in gate 15, what I'm trying to say is basically the crystal sheath bundles that filter everything, that filter all of the neutrinos, those must be amplifying in some sense. And I do believe, I don't remember all the camel and the I should go back to it. What is it? The camel and the dog. Yeah, it's been years. But the camel and the dog and all that stuff, I haven't really looked at that for a while, but I'm pretty sure this has all the answers. So I'm not going to, ponder too far afield here in this case. I just kind of want to set the... Teresa Blanding is talking about, with cognitive... She's saying basically that your design tone is your inner authority, whatever the design tone is. Well, I just want to talk about what design tone is. So she's talking about design tone and saying it is what's constantly filtering one neutrino at a time from the neutrino stream. Okay, that's true. It's getting the neutrino stream. It's tuned to the neutrino stream of the sun and the Earth, I guess. Right? I mean, can we say that? Can we say that those are the neutrinos? But it can't be filtering them both at the same time. So see here, this makes me wonder, is the design tone really just the personality sun? And the Earth is also an activation but has its own design crystal? I mean, in other words, do we need to have a design crystal for each neutrino stream? This would be a really interesting question because, you know, there's a simultaneous neutrino stream coming from Mars as there is from Venus. And how do you reconcile that if the filtering agent, the design crystal, only takes in one neutrino at a time? Right? One neutrino at a time. Now, I suppose it could just work through some sort of cloud saturation kind of thing, like a self-healing network or a self-amplifying network where, because the thing is, you know, you have, so let's look at the number of planetary conditioning bodies. There's Sun, Earth, which is not used in any other astrological system, at least not like this. We don't use Ascendant, though. We don't use Chiron. There's Sun, there's Earth, there's Moon, nodes, it's 5. And then we have Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, so we're up to 10. And then we have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So we're up to 13. So we have 13 conditioning factors. That's what I thought, because I remember thinking that the maximum number of gates could be 26 activated, because that's the personality of this design. You know, but most people have far less because they have double activations. Okay, so 13 conditioning agents, activating agents. Now, is what's happening that all of these 13 agents, I mean, this is what I think is that, I think it's like Jupiter or something. I don't want to misspeak, you know, so I'm just completely imagining it at this point. But from my own kind of metaphorical imagination, something like Jupiter is this cosmic broom going through space and being the one that actually is a star or an X star with only 4% of its, you know, of the neutrinos that we're getting from it. So it's very low luminosity, of course. 4% of the neutrinos at any given moment in time being the ones that came from Jupiter. Maybe what it's actually doing, I'm pretty sure Ra describes how it all works in the Rave Cosmology stuff, and, you know, don't quote me on this because I'm going to completely get it wrong, but it's something like the neutrinos from these 13 conditioning agents or 13 activator agents are probably all actually routed in the cosmos itself, in the actual, in the solar system, in our solar system, but I mean cosmically, not locally, so to speak. In our solar system, you know, they're routed somehow so that they can come to us and so that they can program our personality and prime design crystal one neutrino at a time. Now, I don't know how it works with all of our non-prime design crystals, because every cell has a design crystal, right? So that's not like, I'm calling the prime design crystal, we normally just call it the design crystal because it's like the one that orchestrates everything else, the one that's represented by the design Sun, Earth. But my question being, so at that point, if it is represented by the Sun, Earth, what that's really referring to is a very particular orientation of this design crystal in the G center. And it's like there's this interesting way that the division of time, or the division of time and space in some sense, because it's a spatial grid, is represented in the orientation of the crystals of consciousness, which are not atomic crystals, right? They're not like a crystal like I could find cracking this open, you know? I've been calling them dark matter crystals, because I don't really know. I mean, they're, you know, not atomic. They're not something that we have, they're 3 neutrino widths wide, but that doesn't mean that they're, you know, or they're 2 or 3, they're about 2 or 3 neutrino widths wide, just wide enough that a neutrino can go in one face based on the base orientation, really, I guess. It's very fascinating, yeah. And so then I guess it works through actual, literal filtration of neutrinos in some cases, but then in the case of like resonance, isn't it true that things like color resonance, that the color of the planets is not actually the orientation of a crystal in the same way, right? I mean, and not just the planets, but the nodes, because those are also filtering agents. So it really seems to me like what's probably happening is the neutrinos pass through the filtering agent, like the nodes or the planets or the moon. And then after passing through that filtering agent, they do something within our solar system, like going through Jupiter or Mercury, somehow connects the information back to the sun, or somehow. I mean, I don't know all the nuances of this. I would love to go deep into a mystical, put on my mystic hat, but I just don't know it. So something happens, and then those neutrinos, the exact same neutrinos, or at least the information that was carried by those, it's almost like sockets in HTTP. Like the neutrinos come from some distant stars, background neutrinos, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Then they go through the filtering agent, which is the conditioning agent. There's 13 of them. They go through Pluto, or they go through Neptune, or they go through, those neutrinos pass through, whatever that filtering agent is. At that point, they do something. They have to hit something. I don't know what they hit. Do they hit the sun? And then the sun has neutrinos that are passing through it, that it then sends the next message. It's almost like anything can get to anywhere because the neutrinos are coming from all directions. So it allows information transmission, because you can say it's not so simple that a neutrino passed through Mercury and then passed through me as a little baby. It's not that simple, because Mercury is not as big, right? No, it's that a neutrino passed through Mercury and then hit the sun, say, right? That always happens. There will always be neutrinos passing through Mercury hitting the sun, because there's always, no matter what direction Mercury is from the sun, going to be neutrinos flying towards the sun, because they're flying from all directions. So those neutrinos then hit the sun, say, or something else, if it works. I don't remember if it works with Jupiter or how it works, but and then they hit this planetary, this thing, and then another neutrino comes along the very next moment and goes bloop, and then it's able to carry that information, because it's like the information is instantaneously saved or recorded so that the next neutrino can just pick it up. It's like a very simple, like, asynchronous messaging system of the cosmos through neutrinos, you know what I mean? So the neutrino goes through the sun, say, or some other conditioning filter, and then at that point it hits the Earth, because the neutrinos from the sun are, like, obviously bigger than the Earth. So no matter where you are on Earth, there's going to be neutrinos that have passed through the sun that are hitting the Earth. Now, the other interesting things, I'm not going to go into this too much because I don't want to, I just want to give a little hint of something to talk about in the future. Maybe it would be, Mercury's role with its 88-day approximately cycle, and what that is, how cool it is for Mercury to have the 88-day, and then the 88-degree offset between the design and the personality, where it's kind of like at any given moment in time, the seeds are being sown for what comes 88 days from now. So the exact conditions that you're feeling right now will be somebody's design. You know what I mean? And the exact conditions you're feeling right now will be somebody's personality, which is why Ra would always make the joke about, everyone in the world said hi to you when you were born. They just didn't know it. They all said hi to you because if you, had a real moody energy, that's the imprint of the neutrino weather at that time, and the whole world was moody when you were born because it was a 1222 day or whatever, And if you had the 6447, it was that quality, and so on. Or if you had, adrenaline channels, for me, 952. Everybody was focusing and concentrated and still, and I took in that energy of focus and concentration and stillness in my channel of stillness, right? So we get the neutrino weather at the time. Okay, so the design Sun-Earth tone then is filtering one neutrino at a time, and they're coming in, they're coming through, they're coming through. Okay, well, Teresa Blanding and John Martin are saying this is your inner authority. This is what brings your inner authority. It's bringing you, like, cosmic information in some sense. The neutrino information is actually the information of how to move. It's, it's kind of how our unconscious, I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but it kind of sounds like what they're saying is like, it's what animates life in some sense, is this design tone. I have to see more what they're saying, but I know that they're saying that they distrust the personality tone. So for me, or not personality tone, but the personality, what they called conceptual channels, which are personality channels, right? Because you can have a designed sun, earth, and an undefined center. I mean, it can get quite complicated. What happens then is your defined, if your design tone is in an undefined center, it could be pretty tricky, right? Because do you only then get in touch with it through activation? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, but at the same time, are they saying that a reflector can just literally always get in touch with their design tone and have instant feedback, always with zero interference from the mind? I mean, that sounds too good to be true. It sounds way too good to be true. Because my opinion of the whole thing is that we really do get to witness the mechanics at work, and as the mechanics happen, what we witness is when the mind is able to get out of the way, the design tone is there. But unless you're dropping acid, or unless you're doing some kind of self-hypnosis, or unless you're undergoing some mutative experiment, there's so many conditions that have to be so precise for that design tone to get through. And I think the fundamental one is that the color is no longer transferring. And what Ra said is when you follow strategy and authority, it locks and it never transfers again. So what Ra seems to be saying is that it's impossible for you not to live your design once you get the design virus. It's kind of a comfort, but maybe at the same time, the work on some people have never lived their design is the realization that they've never caught the virus. They've never really caught the human design virus. And as I said, I was exposed to human design 9 years before I caught it. And then that was 5 or 6 years ago that I caught it, right? 5 years. Well, yeah, 2015. No, 6 years ago. It's going to be. Okay, so you catch the human design virus of strategy and authority, and it forces you to... Well, here's the thing, though. Rod said he only met one reflector. I assume he meant Dharman. He meant Dharman. But Dharman as a reflector, who is a reflector living his design, it's clear to me, is like, don't even bother looking at the transits or anything. Just realize that generators are going to steamroll all over you, and you just need to do things for yourself and really be there for yourself. He's telling people all sorts. So, if he's the only reflector that Ra has ever even seen wake up, right? So he's never actually seen a reflector follow their strategy and authority. That's what he kind of said about it. I mean, maybe he was being full of hyperbole and being flippant, as he loved to be. But, seemingly. I don't know. Okay, well, in any case, I see, so reflectors have design tone, sun, earth, design tone, that will maybe be part of their inner authority then. But I've never really heard it described that they will, develop. I mean, it makes sense, maybe, that over time, as they are able to kind of meet the trials and tribulations of contending with the cosmos. It's like a video game. I've been playing this video game, Final Fantasy VII, where you play against monster after monster in this, arena you can do. I'm playing the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And that's what it's like for, if you're a reflector, you're on a monthly sort of round where the moon, but everything else too. It's like, so the moon is the thing that's the same every single time, every single 27.3 days, whatever it is. You go against the same thing every time. So it's your time that you're guaranteed, absolutely guaranteed on this really fast cycle to have the exact same 11-hour segments of battling a certain boss, or getting a certain reward, right? It's like this monthly adventure, like the moon's in Gate 29. Maybe you get a huge surge of commitment to actually make it another month, or maybe that's the month where you decide I'm going to off myself. Sorry, I don't, trigger warning. It's a very serious thing, I don't want to make light of that. But it happens. It happens, and I've seen it happen. I've known people, by the way, if you ever have any ideation, anything like that, call prevention hotline, suicide prevention hotline. People will talk to you, and there's also resources online and so on. Because, I think anyone who has Gate 28 must at least be familiar with the purposelessness and despair that might lead to something like that. And yeah, so if you ever have those thoughts, just realize, there's always people that'll talk to you. Okay, so back to the idea though. So a reflector then, might have that Gate 29 activation of commitment for the month and be really high on that from that at once a month. Then Pluto might go into Gate 29. I don't know when that will happen, but and then they might just be like supercharged with commitment, but of course it takes on a different quality when it's a much slower transit. The length of the transit takes on a different quality, and really you just have to follow it and learn about it yourself and witness it and see it, where, if it's Pluto and you're going to be living with it for a very long time, it's going to have a very different quality than if it's the moon, where it's the 11-hour focus of that period of time, especially if you happen to be sleeping through most of that. But I guess what they would say is, okay, so then the reflector waits for the design tone to emerge through all of the personality conditioning. Okay, so there's the personality conditioning field and the kind of reactive conditioning field, and if the reflector makes it without reacting, they get in touch with their smell or their taste and so on, and there's probably a way they get in touch with it, which would be that, they would get in touch with smell or taste in a very left variable active way. That's a splenic way, so it's concentrated, so it's always on. And if it's, outer vision or inner vision, they would periodically get in touch with it. It wouldn't be all the time. It would be periodically, getting in touch with that. And then it would be cyclical, which means going in phases if it is feeling or touch, right? Feeling and touch are going to be cyclical. There'll be cycles and kind of beginnings and middles and ends to phases with what they go through and how they get in touch with it. So someone with and also I've been talking about design internal, design external on the Human Design Catalyst group. Please join if you're on Facebook, by the way. And one of the things I've been talking about in that is the difference in design internal, the design Sun Earth, and design external, the design nodes, kind of like the internalization and externalization themes of profile, where people get them mixed up because of the not self, so they get them backwards, I haven't really seen this on the design side with the internal and external, but at least it's an interesting metaphor to think about what it is to actively or passively program your environment or condition your environment through an externalization theme versus to have a fixed way how you take in information and how you take in the world. And this is actually a great way to just say how I see the design tone. So I'm going to use generator as an example, but I think it works the same if you're splenic or if you're, it's going to, not exactly the same, but I'm going to use the waiting to respond as an example. Okay, so think of the classic Western movie. Let's have a sacral generator, no emotional clarity, nothing, right? Sacral generator, waiting to respond, who's really living their design. Because I think a lot of what we see, even acting manuals, try to teach actors how to live their design by going into a trance state. Personality typology, Jungian people try to teach Jungians how to live their design by accessing the inferior function, which is something that some actors have realized also helps you go into your body and into this dispreferred mode of cognition and way of being and so on. That actually is a secondary, some actors call it second sight or second sense. In any case, the flow state, there's a million different versions of it. And most of them don't have the nuance and detail and precision of human design, nor do they have the kind of yin knowledge of human design, the yin wisdom of human design. But in any case, what I'm trying to say is, so we have these images in like a film, like a Western, say, of a generator, sacral generator cowboy who's waiting to respond. I think it was actually Ra who used this example as the generator. But I've taken it a little bit further to say it's actually the design tone that gets through. So if they're outer vision, it's like that. And if they're inner vision, they close their eyes. And the guy's like, and the guy goes, I'm talking to you. Hey, you. And he touches the shoulder, and then the guy just even with his eyes closed, or like a Zatoichi kind of samurai theme, the inner vision is the cognitive superpower that is sort of idolized in film and media and manga, like Hunter x Hunter, where there's 5 different aura types, and each aura type has certain cognitive superpowers, and they seem to relate to different tones or senses, and some people have super taste, and some people have super smell, and you could find 20 different versions of the human design mythos in sci-fi, fantasy, manga, anime, and so on. It's really out there, in films and books and so on. So I guess all I'm saying is, how I see it is that that's the kind of image that we see of, it's the cognition coming through because the person's waiting to respond. Because they're waiting to respond and they're not giving in to the pressure of their undefined root, which is telling them to act, and they're not giving in to the undefined ego, which is getting offended and choked up, and they're not giving in to the, you know what I mean? And because they're staying true to that waiting to respond, remaining faithful to the response, it's not until the person touches them, but it's their smell, because they're waiting to respond, they smell something, and that smell tells them what to do. Not necessarily in a splenic way. I mean, I think it's even more obvious with splenic spontaneity. So maybe the better example would be a splenic generator for that Western. But if you're a generator with the 4253, this is about phases of your life, and this is about after a phase of your life starts to smell funny, a relationship starts to smell funny, you start to gag on and choke on, having to say certain words. That would be a taste example, right? Because you don't like the taste of those words in your mouth. But I don't mean to use it as a conceptual metaphor, which would be more on the personality side, of course. I'm trying to say quite literally there is a confluence between, and this is what Lacan discovered. This is what Lacan discovered. I'm always pointing out how, certain HD analysts like Genoa Bliven have found ways to discuss words and signifiers as bundles of meaning, that gates are essentially collections of meaning and bundles of meaning and narrative beats, but it's hard to talk about it. I would urge anyone into human design to look at tvtropes.com. Look at how standard the tropes are. Look up Dramatica, not Encyclopedia Dramatica, which is its own weird corner of the internet, but Dramatica, the system developed in the 90s and 2000s for screenwriting and screenwriting analysis and storytelling analysis. So type in Dramatica storytelling. You will be blown away looking at TV tropes or Dramatica. I was joking last night with Mike. I was telling him I tell people that human design is more like TV tropes than astrology. And he said, well, astrology itself is a repository of traits. And I said, yeah, but they're character traits. Human design is a repository of traits of things that happen in your life. Astrology is like, this is who you are. Human design is like, don't be a trope. Don't fall prey to the laws of the Maya because you don't know them. Educate yourself what the laws of the Maya are. I love Proust. He said, there are inherent laws to the psyche. Laws, psychological laws that one must obey, that they cannot break. And when you're writing, you have to obey these laws. And all writers agree that you must obey the laws of the psyche when you are writing. However, all great writers, this is the quote, I kind of messed it up earlier, it's all great writers agree on what the laws of the psyche are. All petty writers, but among petty writers there's great disagreement. There's much disagreement. God, I mangled that quote. You see what I'm saying? He's saying that if you're a great writer, you've become a great writer on account of learning the same psychic laws from learning from other great writers, right? But if you're just a petty writer, you're arguing with a bunch of other petty writers. Each have your own version of what those laws are. Really, really profound. And I think another example of how mutants throughout history, but particularly since 1781, have really laid the groundwork for human design. Really. I see like Goethe, Proust, I see the Romantics, I see the Weimar Republic thinkers, I see Novalis, and you can really go to some cool places when you look at history of philosophy, psychology, critical theory, 1781 to present. I would love to teach that. Let's just teach the nine-centered stuff. Sounds good to me. So anyway, so the design tone starts to come through, and I don't mean to say that we make up because see, here's the thing, someone like Jenna Zoe will say, oh, someone has tone 2 taste on their design side, that means they have good taste in clothing. Well, I mean, thank you, but also, no, I'm wearing weird striped socks in my, it does not mean, I don't like I don't like the taste of these socks. My taste cognition actually does have a physical, visceral, it's like, it does relate to my sacral response, and it does relate to the sense of abjection. By the way, generators, required reading for generators should be Julia Kristeva's theory of abjection. What's it called? It's theory of the abject or something. I forget the exact. Oh, horror, abject horror, theories of horror. God, I am really... Powers of Horror, is that it? Powers of Horror, yes. Okay, yeah. Every generator... everyone should read that. It's a great book, but I actually don't have a copy. I was envious when I saw a copy on Mike's bookshelf. Mike Steenbeck Litvin, my best friend, and one of my best friends, and business partner, and fellow human design analyst. But in any case, I've read it, and it's great. And, abjection, disgust, disgust can be linked to tone. But I also wonder if, tone really does have hints for all the different varieties, then, of sacral response. But the thing is, what if somebody's design sun, earth, tone is in a undefined center? I guess it's still telling you that their design... It's telling you that their design crystal is still oriented in such a way that it will bubble up through that particular tonal cognition, and it'll only get through when there's no color transference, right? Which is when a landscape person stops wanting to live in the city, and it's when, and gives up on that, not necessarily out of mental, like, I'm going to give up on that dream, or out of despair, but out of actually... living their design and being aligned to what is essentially correct for them. And so, or when a circumstances person stops looking at like what food they're eating and starts looking at when they're eating. Just that simple shift to noticing when, and noticing who's around them, and noticing the conditions, the circumstances really, but I never liked the distinction between circumstances and conditions, because what he really should say is it's about the food, it's about what you're eating, or it's about when you're eating. That really is how I understand it. So the circumstances ones kind of need intermittent fasting to a point, to a degree. Okay, so the design tone, it's filtering these neutrinos. The neutrinos are coming through, and then we are somehow gaining information from them, but it's like our body has that information. Our body knows, our design knows. And what's interesting is, Ross said to be careful making decisions for 88 days before your birthday, because you're in that in-between phase roughly 1/4 of the time where you're out of sync, where your design, your unconscious is already in the next cycle. It's already in the next year, And so, in some sense, our minds are always lagging behind. Our personality is lagging behind. Because what we see with the 88-day offset is not that the design is 88 days lagging behind. No, the design's already been there for 88 days before the personality shows up late to the party. The design is first. The unconscious, rather. And I don't even know if we should really call it that. I call it that because I have a Jungian understanding, which is also why I say un and not subconscious, right? Because subconscious puts it in a position underneath you. Some people do prefer the term subconscious. I don't actually I like just saying personality and design, honestly. Personality and design is great. Like, those are great words for it. Unconscious and conscious are helpful if you have a Jungian background. Now, some people might say, look at the evidence because if you're not aware of this, for those of you who are not aware, I wasn't until recently, human design was presented to the Zurich Institute, to the Jungians, in like the early 90s. By a Jungian guy. I think it was Jurgen, or maybe somebody else. Maybe I'm just conflating that because his name starts with J-U. But, in any case, somebody presented it. A close friend of Ra presented human design and was laughed out of the Jung Institute. And there's documentation of that. And, Jan van den Berg has done this fantastic PDF called Ra's Work, which documents some of this. Okay, so some people might say that's evidence that we should just completely dismiss the work of Carl Jung. Not at all. It's just evidence that mutation continues to move, and that where mutation occurs, where change is occurring, there's certain signposts and you can see. And sorry, but the 90s in Zurich was not one of those places. That was where mutation was being preserved. And it's a difference. It's still cool. That preservation of that mutation is still cool. I'm glad they did it. Okay, well, so now I want to talk a little bit about the weird claims. So in the parts of the video I've watched from John Martin and Teresa Blanding from 8 months ago, I'm kind of late to the party here, but, John says, look, personality, or what he calls conceptual definition, he says it is life force energy. It does determine your aura. He doesn't say it determines your aura, but he says it's life force energy, so I imagine it would have to, right? So he agrees with Ra that it's not life force energy. Like, we are a quantum, and the life force energy comes just the same from the black or the red side of the chart, right? The personality or the design. Okay, well, he says that, but then it seems to me, and there's people talking about it that are familiar with his system, that are saying things like, look, Ra was a mental projector. Really, that's all he had on this design, was mental projector. He had the design of a mental projector, right? So it's really about if you recognize him or not. He was kind of like, and I think this is a real conflation, because I think he obviously lived his life as a manifester. But then the other thing would be, I guess what they would be assuming again is that Ra's taste cognition happened because, like, what he was saying was his splenic ego authority. Like, he said he didn't do the Rave Cosmology materials for many years because he knew it would take 2 years to teach, and his ego kept telling him, his ego kept putting a veto on it. But on other times he talks about spleen as the awareness center, as always kind of overriding the ego, giving him splenic authority. The ego is what gave him the motor. But both of them being part of his decision-making process, because obviously he could be well aware through his splenic awareness that he doesn't have the energy through his ego to do it, And then later he's like, okay, I finally have the splenic hit, that now I have the time, now I have the ego energy to do all the Rave Cosmology stuff, right? And I think something similar to that can happen even to sacral people, where they notice they finally have accumulated enough energy to do something. They get up the willpower to do it. Or, if it's willpower, if it's ego, whether defined or not. If it's undefined, it's just like collecting the ambient willpower from other people, and from the transits. But I'm not saying it's necessarily good for them, right? A lot of times they use like a sacral person will use willpower, and it's totally wrong. So, everyone does. Like, everyone struggles with, this is part of what it is to be a human, is like to make wrong decisions. Like, this is what we're learning to do, is making right decisions. This is what human design is telling you what to do. We're telling you how to tell if you made a right decision. Because you get to see yourself experiencing the reward of that decision in the signature of your type. So your type's not going to change, Ra got his reward in peace, and he got the feedback that he'd made the right decision, whether he made it through trusting his taste, right? Trusting, I shouldn't put in quotes, it really is literally, I guess, taste, but it's also an overloaded signifier, an overdetermined multivalent signifier, not necessarily in the sense Jenna Zoe is saying it of like fashionable taste, but definitely in some ways, and this is why, by the way, I'm not so harsh on Jenna Zoe. She says, I'm harsh on her for other reasons, but she says, people who have taste cognition have good taste in things, and I'm like, I am proof that that's not true. But no, I'm joking. I do. My Gate 26 usually makes the opposite joke. I'm like, I know, but what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't necessarily think that's true, but at the same time, I love that effort, because the effort to weave the keynotes and the effort to deconstruct the keynotes in different ways and to really experiment with those is just wonderful. It's just fantastic. So, okay, so So yeah, Ra was a taste person like me. We have the same TCL both sides. And I know I'm saying that a lot, but it's interesting to me. It is not just that it's like a 1 in 20,000 or however much chance to have the same TCL both sides, but it's also just cool to be able to understand and have an example of someone who is really living their design, who actually has a really good example of outer authority on the one side. Like, I'm just happy that I get to see an example of someone who like unequivocally was living his design. I'm a first line, I'm malleable. I am wanting to mold and shape myself. I'm like, teach me, I'm ready to learn. I'm not like determined to resist the call. I'm like ready to go, come on. So, I think it's cool for me. I just like to see that. So, okay, so seeing that he had taste, I have taste. Okay, so, obviously we have different authorities. I would still be sacral. I'm sacral on the design and the personality side because I have a conscious 2946 and unconscious 52-9. So, or personality design. Again, I just say conscious, unconscious because I have so many years as a Jungian. I really don't mean anything by them. Someone did tell me the other day, though, he said, why don't we just say personality and design? Because, why say conscious, unconscious? That adds so much psychological baggage to it that's not there when we just say personality and design. So there's something to be said for that. Whoa, the wind is picking up. I'm taste. I love taking a big sip of the wind. One of the things I love about being at high elevation is how windy it is, and I love that thing Ross said about how when you're in the mountains, you're getting hit with wind from hundreds of miles away, carrying information. I love tasting that wind. I am very excited to dig deeper into John Martin and Teresa Blanding's work, simply because I'm also excited to see, can we notice? See, I don't believe we can notice the design side. I don't believe we notice that. I believe we notice what happens when we go into a trance state. So when I had my sacral awakening experience and was in a very deep kind of trance state, almost like a post-psychedelic state for 8 days in 2016, I was walking around expressionless. My voice was deeper, my face was fully relaxed, my body was different, my sleep was different, my body temperature was different. Everything. And I wasn't in some sort of manic episode, quite the opposite. But I wasn't in a catatonic. I wasn't disturbed in the slightest. I was cool as a cucumber. And I've kept a lot of that, and it's stuck around as a more embodied, grounded, in some sense more macho, because my dispreferred, see, the interesting thing here is, to use objective personality nomenclature for just a moment here, I have double feminine blast. That means I have feminine introverted intuition with feminine extroverted thinking. So when I talk and blast, it is in a meandering, holistic, circular, as Jung said about Nietzsche, he would circle around a topic and clip it on the wing and then take off again and then circle back around. This is an intuitive thinking blast with double feminine. Well, my exact opposite of that is my sensing feeling, which is double masculine. And when I had my sacral awakening, I went deep into my sensing feeling. And for someone who is familiar with personality typology, you can see how Jung and his model of individuation was essentially a version of what living your design is, using a different vocabulary from an earlier era that hadn't quite got it, because he didn't have the experience of the voice. All he had instead was a 15-year ongoing kind of mystical experience that he documented as his engagement with the unconscious, an engagement with the self and with God and with other things. Okay, so Jung's individuation and deconditioning from human design as similar to individuation by going into your inferior function, or if you're familiar with objective personality, which you can find out about on objectivepersonality.com, that is a system which will explain it in even more depth in terms of what they call the animals and the animal stack and the dispreferred animals. And so my sensing feeling animal and my sensing thinking animal, my consume and my play, one of which is double masculine, the other is half masculine, half feminine, but with masculine sensing, those are effectively my dispreferred aspects. And they're very slow for me. And they're very awkward for me because I'm in a different psychological headspace most of the time, because it's like coming up for air to go back into my intuition, right? And even though I am lead in NIFI, because my FI was less developed and I hadn't slowed down into it, it's much slower. Because of that, what had happened was, when I actually had my sacral awakening, I started to realize by going internally, because for people who are not familiar with introverted feeling, with FI, it is the function that tells you how you feel about things. And people who are FI leads, they can be really into somebody, or first of all, they don't really let themselves get really into somebody. They let themselves get kind of interested, and then they have very nuanced gates of I am now more interested, or I've lost interest. Oh, that person said something wrong. I lost interest. And usually something that lacks integrity, or that lacks ethics, or lacks taste, or lacks values, and so on. So, okay, so I don't want to derail too deeply into that. I mean, it would be lovely to go into some of the nuances of understanding how, depending on your personality type, you're going to have a different kind of deconditioning experience, because your deconditioning experience is going to alleviate a lot of the problems people are experiencing. What you find when you go into any of these personality type forms, whether it's Enneagram, objective personality, cognitive type, whatever system, Myers-Briggs, Jungian, you find all these people complaining about all the problems in their life because of their type. And they've correctly identified the problems. What they don't realize is that when you practice your strategy and authority in human design, when you decondition, maybe when you get in touch with your design tone through strategy and authority, and maybe through other ways, I'm not really sure how that would be, because I see the unconscious as kind of hidden from view at the design side, right? We're not necessarily aware of it, although it delivers, we find ourselves in it. What happens though is, what I'm saying is, the deconditioning process brings you into a different place where, especially when you're deep in it, I do think you kind of go deeper and come back. I don't think I need to stay in that depth. Also because the proximity to the unconscious brings you a certain vitality and a certain libido, and you gain a whole lot of energy, but at the same time it can be dangerous to stay there. Right? It's dangerous to stay there. What it's really about is being able to go into the dispreferred functions, so living your design, getting in touch with your strategy and authority, and deconditioning, noticing the not-self themes, and noticing as they have less and less hold over you. What all of this does is it allows you to appropriately deepen into the other cognitive functions that you're not normally using in modes of cognition when you need to, right? And the way it does this, for me, with my sacral awakening, was through completely slowing down. Now, I don't know if that would be completely different if it's somebody else who's a 3420, which is let's do it now, and they have been can't get off the couch for a couple years, and then they start living their design, and suddenly they're doing a million things. Everyone's deconditioning is different, right? And some people are sensing types, and they're gonna be going into their dispreferred intuition and their dispreferred, and so on. I'm just saying, for my personality type, I saw with my own eyes and didn't really even understand it until much later, which is a very 46-29 type of thing, the sacral awakening, where I just began, it was the first time in my life where I'd be sitting there and people would say, "Wow, you're such a good listener." And I'd just be looking at the lines on their face, and I would be doing it, and I would be thinking of things to say, and then I would immediately forget. I didn't care, right? My whole life, I'd been trying to keep track of everything that had happened. This is, again, not something that's going to be true for everybody. This is because I'm an introverted intuitive. Introverted intuition is like a journaling function, like introverted sensing, where it's basically constantly process managing. For anyone who has any sensing or intuition of either attitude dominant, they're going to be process managers, effectively. And I'm process managing by keeping track of everything that's going on. Well, believe me, losing my place in a conversation, or losing my place in a lecture, or losing my place, those things are terrifying to an introverted intuitive. And letting go of where you are in that can be so hard, right? But what I noticed was I was letting go of that, because it was the trying to hold on to that all the time. Trying to hold on to that control in some sense, which again is not going to be, for an ESFP, it's going to be trying to hold on to freedom, right? And for an IP, it's going to be trying to hold on to uniqueness and individuality and not being like everybody else. And for an EJ, it's going to be trying to hold on to friendships and getting approval from others. And, everyone's going to have their version of it, right? So no matter who you are, whatever your Enneagram, personality type, all of this stuff, you're going to have your own dilemmas. And I think a lot of these systems, especially the ones that emerged more recently, really are accurate and do nail a lot of the dilemmas. But they don't offer the right solution. Not always. Some do. The mutative core of them really do. Like von Franz and Jung really do. They, tell you about individuation, which is not for everyone, is only for the select mutative few, and goes very deep and is fraught with perils and fraught with dangers, and involves getting to know all of the autonomous complexes, which are basically the undefined centers and or bridging gates, of a person's design. And it's incredible when you start to realize that, what Ra was given as direct knowing and as a sort of passenger to help him, Uru, decode it all. Someone like Jung stumbled in the dark and really circumscribed and was unable to describe. Jung even said, I can only circumscribe it, not describe it, right? But he was still a precursor. He still prefigured it. And I'm not saying that Ra depended on Jung's work or anything like that. You might not even know much about him, although he did write about him a little bit. I love the difference between Jungian dream analysis and human design dream analysis, by the way. Very good stuff there. Okay, well, I have gone far afield of my initial investigations, but I guess pontification's more like it. But I guess I'm just kind of thinking around, so design tone, how does that work? I do think that for me, as an INTJ, I get my design tone through my inferior sensing. It only makes sense because my inferior sensing is the door to my unconscious. It is what transmits information from the unconscious into consciousness and feeds it to my consciousness, and I can get closer or farther away from it depending on my level of trance, hypnosis, or simply headspace, or if I've responded and if I'm into something with my 4629, if I'm so deeply in it, and with my life force energy of 4629 pumping, even though it's fully conscious, conceptual channel, but I'm fully in it, I'm so deeply wrapped up in that, and I'm not checking the phone, I'm not checking the time, I'm just in it. Then I start to get in touch with my, then I think I'm probably, to me it seems like I'm in touch with my design tone at that point. I don't want it to be that I'm always just tasting the inside of my mouth. It's not like I'm supposed to go through my life tasting the inside of my mouth and noticing for subtle differences, as that changes. I know it's part of the concentrated splenic binary and all, but it's not like I want to, live my whole life continually, moment to moment to moment, noticing that consciously. But I think the point is, without noticing the taste consciously, it's just working. It just works when you're living your design. Here's my point, So here's what I want to say. With my 4629, that's fully conscious. But if I have successfully, and believe me, every 2946 can tell you what absolute horrendous hell, what seventh layer of bureaucratic nightmare it is when you say yes to do something with someone you don't have a sacral response for. And I have a fully conscious 4629. With no unconscious activation at all, no design side, fully personality. And when somebody says, do you want to go hiking? And I'm like, fuck yeah, I want to go hiking. And I do, it's great. And when someone says, do you want to go hiking? I'm like, yeah, that sounds okay. And I go, and it sucks, and I'm checking my watch, and I'm going to get out of here, which thankfully hasn't happened for years. I was thinking my last time I went hiking, I had total sacral response to going hiking. It was amazing. I drank wine. I had a great companion on my hike. I read books, it was fantastic. And, having that experience, which was an incredibly mentally stimulating experience, and incredibly invigorating to my, personality and vivifying to my personality, and in Jungian terms, enlivened my anima, so that my anima, kind of like how I am when I do these videos, came out, and I was full of life and excitement. And that was an absolute, real, authentic sacral response, fully on the personality side, fully for an adventure. And an adventure, first and foremost, maybe even of the mind, and of the stimulating stories. And it's, the personality side is not just concepts. Go to tvtropes.com. It's like the stories of your life too, right? And what I'm saying is, that I don't think I needed to be in touch with my taste the whole time to guide me through that, because I have the feedback of the satisfaction after that of, damn, that was fun. And that level of satisfaction, of having gotten that satisfaction, is not because my unconscious, my design 952 sat for 4 hours and focused and concentrated. No, it's because I got to have that 2946 adventure. And that 2946 adventure was absolutely sacral, and I got the the feedback for it that I wasn't checking my watch the whole time. Because you can tell, if you're at 2946, you get to discover immediately if you actually made a sacral yes or not, right? You really do. And it's funny to see that, how if you didn't have a sacral yes, no matter if it's a cool thing, doesn't matter, you're going to be checking your watch, you're going to be wondering what the next thing is, you're going to be whatever it is. You're not going to be engrossed in it. You can only get engrossed in it when you really had an authentic sacral response. So I'm having authentic sacral responses through a conceptual channel. I don't even know that it has to do with my design tone taste. I don't know that it has to do with any of that, right? To me seems like my sacral response at that point, might not have to do with the design Sun Earth. The design Sun Earth are 52, 58 for me. And that's part of my root, right? Not part of my sacral, it's part of my root. And it's, so I guess, how am I supposed to interpret that, right? Part of my root definition, but for some people it's not going to be defined. I don't know. I do think that in some sense, because the design tone is the tone of the design crystal, that in some sense, yes, when I respond to the 4629, I'm on that hike and I'm drinking that wine and having a blast and whatever we're doing, glamping style hike. At the same time, my design tone is super happy because I'm sipping delicious wine, right? So my design tone is happy there. And I am mouth breathing and enjoying what a delicious air that's coming through here. Delicious mountain air out in nature. So I see that, I see it. One thought I want to have though, I hope it's not too windy, it probably is, but it's getting very windy here. We're having a little windstorm. So one thought is, and then I'll leave it on this, internalization, externalization themes. Your design internal tone, how you take things in. Your design external tone, what you put out. I want to do more videos on this. I want to talk about this. It's something that's interesting to me. I hope it's interesting to other people too. I want to, I touched on it earlier, and I just want to bring it up one more time, just to think about also, what it is to, how the internalization and the externalization work, and how basically at any given moment my motivation's ability to remain locked into desire has to do with my color's ability to not transfer as the neutrino stream. It's almost like my voice's ability not to falter as the neutrino stream goes through it on the personality side. And so you get to see in real time my vitality wax and wane, or my, in Jungian terms, the anima or the animus, or what I've been calling the animex as a gender neutral version for people who are neither male nor female. That figure, that contrasexual impulse will animate a person quite literally so that they become full of vitality and full of life. Whatever that life is, whether it's somebody like me who's full of desirous hellfire, damnation, finger pointing, or someone with innocence who becomes full of the liveliness of observation. And did you notice this? And it's a very different kind of life force energy, right? And I guess what I'm trying to say is, noticing that internal versus the external, the view, right, or perspective on the personality side, and then also noticing the tonal, how the tonal works on the design side. And I guess my only point here is, I see that the design side is for the decision making, the personality side is for the outer authority, and the signposts, effectively, which help the outer authority not falter as much, because it helps the outer authority get comfortable in its place as outer authority. And so the outer authority is effectively determined in quality by how it is handling the neutrino stream at any given moment, in some sense, right? And it's handling that neutrino stream on the personality side, through the personality crystal. As it's coming in, the color is either transferring or not. And on the design side, the color is either transferring or not. But on the personality side, it's always going to be pullable into transference. But still not easy. It's not easy. People get locked in transference. You can also get pretty damn locked in your color, as long as it's not color 4. I mean, it really depends. But, there are... And it's okay to see the flicker, too, because the flicker is almost like... You can see how the transference it's just 2 different modes. And the one mode is not the real mode. It's the fake mode. And that you have to continually correct it to the real mode. It reminds me, I have a friend who went to a shamanic ritual, and the shaman... my friend was trying to count his prayer beads, his Sufi prayer beads, and he was trying to stay in control of the situation and not let the drugs take over. And the shaman would go over and he would hold his hand right here, look him in the eye, and he would go, just like that, right between his eyes. So he would look at him and he would go, like that. And what that would do is the eyes would appear and locked in, as he would turn it. He would block the eyes and then fix it and then show the eyes. And by turning everything on its side, my friend felt like he had this shelf that he was holding of all of his beliefs and ideologies and everything, and it turned completely vertical. And it all fell off on the floor, and all the stuff just fell. And then he kept trying to say what it was and get his hook into the truth, but the truth was like smooth, a smooth surface, where he would just say, it's, and he wouldn't really quite get the truth. And then after time, it would, turn sideways again, and he'd be like, oh yeah, I see what it is. It's just that. Oh, that's right, I took drugs. I'm in a shamanic ritual. That's right, I'm doing this. And it goes like this. And then, the guy would come back, and sure enough, he'd do this again, it would all fall on the floor, and he would lose it again, but then also gain the real truth. Like, oh, aha. But as soon as he tried to put the word to what the truth was, it would slide off of it until the truth turned horizontal again. Very interesting, weird way of kind of understanding what's going on in some of those cases. But in any case, I feel like that continual correction metaphor, that metaphor of continual correction, or as James Hillman said when he was asked if he's counterculture, he said, no, but I stand slightly askew to the daily round. And that's such a nice way to say that you're not really for or against the mainstream, you're just slightly askew to it, but due to conditioning, you keep getting turned back to it and have to sometimes remain askew again. I see like the personality side is where you get to really notice through the decisions you've made with your design what people you find in your life who naturally pull you and elect you into your true motivation and away from the transferred motivation on the personality side. On the design side, I think the transference, I agree with Rod, the transference stops and locks in when you start living your design. I have wondered about the 4th color, which both Rod and myself had. I've wondered, he does say it kind of always transfers. So it is a kind of weird special case. And I do think there are really cool things we can see on that side. But just because the 4th color is transferring, I think as long as you're eating correctly according to your variable, your tonal side, and your tonal cognition, and, to be a taste color 4 person is to eat basically alone. And as long as you're doing that, you really do get the taste. It does come through, and it does bring the information you need, and it does really nourish the body. And I feel that nourishment, when I eat, which is alone. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on tone. What is the role of tone for you? What is the role of tone on the personality design side? Particularly, what do you think of John Martin and Teresa Blanding's work of tone on the design Sun-Earth, the design Sun-Earth tone? All right, that's it for me. Ciao from Santa Fe.